Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Biznology Digital Marketing webinar. My name is Frank Reed. I'm one of the bloggers here at Biznology. I'm the managing editor for Marketing Pilgrim blog, which is currently number 12 on the Ad Age Power 150. I also work with companies and individuals by providing education and training services regarding internet and social media marketing. Today, however, you'll be hearing from Mike Moran, the founder of Biznology, the Biznology blog, who will present global social media marketing. Now, before we get to Mike's presentation, we'd love to recognize our sponsors. They're very important to us. We have Abraham Harrison, LLC, the true experts in online public relations. Brick Marketing, full-service SEO solutions company that increases website visitors. Marketing Pilgrim, which you've already heard about, the Internet and Social Media Marketing News blog, and we cut through the bull so you don't have to. And then Source Media, which is the publisher of American Banker Magazine, and Bank Technology News, serving the banking and financial services community. So as we wait for more attendees to join, just let me review the format of our webinar. Our Biznology webinars, they last about 30 minutes, so you can easily fit them into your busy schedule. We record each webinar, and we'll email you that link later this week. During Mike's presentation, you can use your GoToWebinar controls to ask a question. The orange arrow opens and closes your webinar controls, so if you have a question, simply type it into the box labeled questions at any time during the event and press the send button. I'll then be able to select a few questions at the end of the webinar and pose them to Mike. So we highly encourage you to do that during the course of the presentation. So while we're waiting for the last few attendees to join, I'd like to remind you that the Biznology newsletter and blog are available for free at biznology.com. So if you're not already a subscriber, we'd hope that you'll sign up now. So thanks again to all of you for spending the next 30 minutes with us. We know how valuable your time is, so let's introduce today's speaker. Mike Moran is the founder of the Biznology blog, a well-known expert in all things digital marketing, and the chief strategist at Conversion, a leading social consultancy. Mike is the co-author of Search Engine Marketing, Inc., and the sole author of Do It Wrong Quickly. Mike is a veteran of IBM, managing groups in IBM.com for 8 years, retiring from IBM in 2008 as a distinguished engineer. So if you've ever struggled with how to use social media for your international customers, this is the webinar for you. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Frank. So hi, everybody. What we want to talk about today for global social media marketing is to really think about what a community means. So lots of us who have experience in social media think of social communities. So we think about the fact that every social network has a set of communities. We think about we may have a blog that may have a set of contributors that may have a lot of people who tend to read the blog and comment and talk with each other. You might have a message board that creates a community. And those are all communities, but we want to think today about a different kind of community, which is the communities that have different cultures around the world and may use social media differently. You might even find that you've got communities within communities. So within a country, you may have communities that look at different social media venues. Within social media venues, you may find that the communities gather by country or by language. And that's what we want to talk about today. Because social media listening has gone global in the last few years. It started actually even before we even used the term social media. So message boards, which are now considered a kind of social media, even predated the web. And so people might have complaints on message boards. They might have questions that they're asking. Many very deep communities formed as far back as the 1980s on the web, on message boards. And then it moved to blogs, and then social networks, and it's really gone around the world. And that's what we need to talk about today. And so when we think about social media in a global context, we want to think about it from two different aspects. One is from a listening aspect, and another is from an engagement aspect. And both of those things have to be attacked country by country, language by language, because you can't share a message in just any language you want and reach every country. Similarly, you can't listen globally without thinking about each different country market. So let's start by thinking about who the listening leaders are today. So I'm chief strategist at Conversion, so they're obviously my favorite listening company. But there are a number of different companies out there. You can see the Forrester Wave from 2010. That's the most recent one that Forrester's done, where 3 leaders in listening worldwide were Conversion, Nielsen Buzzmetrics, and Radian6, which has since been acquired by Salesforce.com. Now, there are a number of other choices out there for you to make as well, but if you're looking at a global social media listening program, you probably have to think about some requirements that you might not have when you're thinking about a program that only has to work in the U.S., because all of these vendors have very strong presence in U.S. markets, but they don't necessarily have the ability to listen across geography. And that's what you have to focus on when you're thinking about how to look at listening across social media. The kinds of things that you need are different when you're just listening in one country than when you're listening in multiple countries. You still have the problem, especially if you're in a larger enterprise, of being able to send the important data to different areas of your company, but it gets even harder when you're trying to figure out how you're going to send things around the world. So how do you listen around the world, and how do you distribute things around the world? And the place where the problem begins is with the data itself. So part of the problem is that when people talk about social media, they don't often distinguish between the kinds of access that people have to social media data. So there's some data that we talk about a lot that's public data. So most of Twitter, blogs, YouTube, most message boards, anybody is allowed to see it. And the social media listening tools can listen to any of it. There's also a lot of private data. Most of Facebook, most of LinkedIn, a few message boards, and a lot of social media in different countries is actually private. It can only be shared when you're having a license to the data, and it can only be shared when you have friends that are letting you connect to the data. So if someone has become a fan of your Facebook fan page, then you can listen in social media to Facebook data. But otherwise, that data is only shared with other friends of the person who posted it. And there are several differences in different countries that make it harder for you to actually get at a lot of this data. There's also review data, which is in between. The data itself might be public, but what's also happening is that the terms and conditions on the data are saying that you're not allowed to actually use that data for any other purpose except to look at it on their site. So the listening companies cannot get at that data, even though it is ostensibly public data. And so the question is, how do you get access to this information? So with Twitter, you need some kind of license for that data. You need the same kind of thing for a lot of other social media, especially in China. It turns out that China has many, many different social media networks, and all of that data needs to be licensed in order for you to be able to listen to it in an automated way. So how do you listen to things in an automated way? You use natural language processing, or text analytics, it's often called. And so when you think about how to do that, you have to understand that you need the vendor to be able to support that processing in multiple languages if you want to listen globally. And some of that processing is harder to do than others. So just coming up with word dictionaries where you understand which words are positive and negative in different languages, that's not very difficult. But if you're really doing true natural language processing, where you're trying to understand what are the nouns, what are the verbs, which are the entities, so what's a brand name, that can be much harder in some languages than others. In German, for example, many of the nouns are multi-word compound names, and so you have to break those words apart to really understand what it means. Asiatic languages can even be more difficult because you don't have the ease of just splitting words based on a blank. You have to know what the words are and identify which words are 2 characters or even more. And there aren't any listening vendors out there that do every language on the planet. And so And even understanding what language something is written in can be difficult, because even though there are open source, freely available techniques to do that that work really well, they actually don't work well on very small runs of text. So a 140-character tweet might be incorrectly analyzed as to which language it was written in. So you might think, well, what we'll do is we'll just look at the profile of the person on Twitter, and we'll see what language they say they speak. But the thing is that people often put jokes up there as what language they speak, or they don't give an answer at all. So that can be very inaccurate sometimes. So then your question might be, well, what's the point of me listening in another language if I don't speak that language? And sometimes it wouldn't have any point, but what we're starting to see is the ability to use automated translation techniques, so that even though you will find the information you're looking for in the other language, when it's being presented to you, you can use something like Google Translate or even some other kinds of translation mechanisms so you can get the gist of what's going on that web page or in that tweet. Now, for companies that really need to understand what's going on in other markets, and they don't have people perhaps in headquarters that speak every language in the market, you can augment these translations with human translations. And so there's a lot of ways to do that as well. But a lot of people don't really operate by language. They operate by country. So they don't really want to say, I want to do listening in French. They want to say, I want to do listening in Quebec, or I want to do listening in France. And so for those people, it's really important to be able to understand what country things are happening in. And that can be difficult too. Some venues are specific to a country. So a blog will have a URL that will tell you what country it's from. In message boards and some videos, you can do the same thing. But things like reviews, venues like Twitter or Facebook, you might be able to figure out the language, but only looking at self-reported countries do you really understand what country the person's in. But depending on what you're using the listening for, that can be problematic as well, because do you want to know the country that they live in or the one that they're posting from right now? Sometimes it's not the same thing. And so that becomes an issue also. Now, the other thing that's true is that in different countries, people use different social media venues. So let's just look at this interesting map that we got that is helping you see which are the social networks that are popular in each country. And you can see that even though we're familiar with Facebook, and we say Facebook is the big social network here, and you can see a lot of the world is shaded as Facebook being the top social network in that country, there's plenty of countries where it's not the top social network. Some big countries, like in China, QQ is the big social network. In Brazil, it's Orkut. So different countries have different social networks that are their number one. So if you're trying to do listening or engagement in those countries, you can't just willy-nilly say we're going to do Facebook advertising or we're going to listen to things going on Facebook, because that might not be the most important network in that country. And that map only showed us the top network. It didn't show us that there's a real variety here. So even in the countries where Facebook is the top network, look at what the number 2 might be. And there's some countries where you even look at the top 3, like China or Russia, and Facebook's nowhere to be found there. And so all of these different social networks are varied by country, and it changes where you want to listen, and it also changes where you want to engage and reach out and campaign in social media. Beyond thinking about where the venues are that are most popular, you also want to think about adoption rates. For the same kind of activity, which is social media activity, a country like Brazil has 86 out of 100 people participating, and they might spend 5 hours a month on social media networks. But if you can look at a country like Switzerland that has a very advanced economy, but under 60%, and it's less than 4 hours. And so those kinds of things make a big difference, because you might be able to listen in a country and be able to engage in a country, but you might want to pick your targets based on the adoption rate of social media, not just on the population of the country. It's one thing to say a country has a large population. It's another to say they have a large population that's spending lots of time on social media. And if you just even think about Facebook, so forget all of social media activity, let's just look at Facebook. If you're looking at Facebook, there's a different percentage of adoption in different countries, and there's a wildly varying amount of time per person. In Japan, Facebook is hardly used at all, and it's used for hardly any amount of time, even for those who do use it. Whereas in Italy, people are spending enormous amounts of time on Facebook. And so these are the kinds of things that you want to understand. You want to understand where the big venues are country by country. You want to understand how many people are using that type of thing, and you want to know how much time they're spending on it. Now, we've been talking a little bit about listening, but we've also started to talk about engagement. The engagement occurs country by country, too. So in order for you to get the insights from listening, you have to distribute that according to different country practices, but you also need to understand what the social sensibilities are in each country and the advertising practices. Different venues are popular, as we've talked about. Adoption rates differ. But another thing you want to think about is that marketers aren't equally aggressive in every country. Even though social media might be becoming pervasive in a country, if your competition doesn't really work that hard in social media, you might find that you have an advantage because you can go after social media more aggressively than they do. The other thing that's true is that regulation is different country to country. So it could be that in some countries they treat social media the same way they treat mainstream media, while in other places they treat it as a communications tool like the telephone. And so different countries have different regulations that as you enter those countries, especially when you're doing engagement, you need to work with someone local so you understand what the rules are. So think about what the competition might be doing. So your marketing competition might not be very aggressive, even though you know social media is a strong place. So France, for example, has wide adoption of social media, but very few marketers are using social media for their marketing because their tendency is to wait until a new idea is proven before jumping in. Whereas I've spent lots of time over the last few years in Denmark, they have extremely aggressive marketers that are going after social media marketing right now. And so let's think about regulations as we look at it. Now, one of the ways that regulations differ, we talked about, is that some people think of it as media, and other countries maybe don't even allow free speech. And so you have to think, as you're going into different countries that might be restricted, you have to focus on what those regulations might be. You also need to look at the differences depending on what industry you're in. If you're in a highly regulated industry like financial services, or pharmaceuticals, you have to think carefully about how you're going to approach each different country because you might be very constrained about what you're allowed to say, and you might have to report things that you hear. So especially in pharmaceuticals where there are different country regulations on how you do adverse event reporting, you have to be very careful as you enter these countries, even just to doing listening before you really know that you're on solid ground. So let's think about how you do it in a large organization. So my guess is that most of the people on this call are from large organizations, because that's the reason you care about doing things globally. So you have to think about how you're going to govern these things. We've brought up a whole bunch of different things to think about, but how do you coordinate these things across a large organization? The elephant in the living room is that it's very hard to get all of your different business units to do the same thing and to make the same progress and to identify all the different aspects of global social listening and engagement. And so how do you think about this type of thing? A lot of people try to either do this very top-down thing where headquarters says this is how it will be, or they try and reach consensus across every business unit. But the problem is that some business units drive a lot of revenue and some don't. And so you might have very big presence in some countries and very small in others. And so what could we do to try and get all of those big countries on board, but maybe not have the problem of trying to get every small player to agree? So one thing you could do is you could adopt an approach like the United Nations does, where they have the exact same problem you do across a big company. What they have is they know that there are some countries that are extremely important, and if they don't agree to something, we really can't go forward. Whereas they also have kind of a general assembly where any country can be a part of it, and they can hear about all the discussion. They can even make points, but they don't get to vote. And so you can take that kind of approach to social media governance in a global organization. And so think about how you're going to create standards. So how are you going to say, this is the way that we're going to approach measurement when we're in engagement? This is how we're going to approach listening. This is how we're going to standardize on a vendor. So all the experts across all of the countries can share information. And maybe you might have some kind of group that's going to come up with what the answer is globally. And so small organizations might have experts that you want to be part of, but you're going to have the big organizations are going to be the ones who actually get a vote. They're the ones who are going to make a decision. They might be the ones who are putting up the funding, and that's how you can really make progress in global social media. So every company's different. It's not true that everyone can do things the same way, but what you need to think about is what your goals are for global social media. So just like with everything else you do, you don't go into it just saying, well, this looks cool, let's try it. You have to actually think country by country. What is it that we're trying to accomplish here? And it could be that you're going to say, hey, look, it's only the really large countries that we really need to do this in now. We need to do it in the U.S. We need to do it in other countries where we have strong markets, but there's no reason for us to really be focusing on Botswana right now. It's not a big enough market for us to care about. We don't do a lot of business there right now. There isn't a lot of social media adoption. Let's let those things come later. And so country by country, you want to look at each market and make sure that you can set goals that make sense for how you're going to do listening and how you're going to engage in. And it's not going to come easily. I wish that this is something that would be very, very simple, but the truth is that when you're doing something on a global scale, you find that you have to be both global and local. You have to understand what the overall goals are for the corporation, but then you have to country market by country market. You have to go in and make exceptions and make changes and decide how you're going to really operate. And so it doesn't come that easily, but it can be done. Now, I'm hoping that there are a lot of questions out there. And so, Frank, I think we've got a few minutes left, and I want to turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'm sure our attendees have a much stronger idea how to use social media for a global audience, but you're right, there are questions. You need to answer every one of them. I've got several good ones from our audience teed up for you. I'd like to remind our audience that it's not too late to ask a question, so if you go typing it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar controls, you can get your question asked. Before we get to that first question, we need to thank our sponsors once again. Abraham Harrison LLC, the true experts in online public relations. American Banker, the leading information resource serving the banking and financial services community, as well as its sister publications, American Banker Magazine and Bank Technology News. Brick Marketing, full-service SEO solutions company that increases website visitors. And Marketing Pilgrim, the internet and social media marketing news blog. We cut through the bull so you don't have to. So now on to our first question here, Mike. Question is, how do you talked about, you obviously talked about how you need to address each country differently because there's different values and different social constructs, let's say. Do you have a way, or is there any way to discover exactly what these social media rules are in each country?
It's not that simple. There isn't some global way to do that. Obviously, if you're operating in a country, you probably have some kind of legal counsel there, and so you can make sure that you understand the regulations from the legal counsel. But the truth is that these regulations are changing all the time. So the best way, especially if you're a global company and you have global presence, is for you to use employees that you have on the ground in each country and try to work with them. So you might have a central team that is in charge of social media listening and social media engagement, but it's critically important that you round up the folks country by country that are really going to do that engagement and really interpret that listening. And by working with them, they can stay on top of the stories as they break in their countries that say how regulations are changing. In just the last few years, we've seen a big change in how legal departments approach social media. There were some a few years ago that were saying, for example, in pharmaceuticals, we don't want to listen because if we listen then and we hear something, we may have to report an adverse event, and we don't know how to do that. And so a lot of that has changed over the last couple of years because the lawyers understand that not listening is really not an option. I mean, if they could say the same thing about adverse events reported by phone, and they could say, well, our solution is don't answer the phone. And so staying on top of regulations country by country is part of it, but also the reason that you want to engage with local countries is you want those people on the ground to help you understand what is going on in each place, and you want to then be able to train them in the things that are emerging that you're an expert in, so that there's a give and take. They will train you about the market, and you will train them about social media, and between the two groups, they will be able to work out the strategies and the metrics and the plans to execute country by country.
Great, thanks. We have another question, and this one's kind of along the same lines, but it's a bit different. You talked about how we have this desire to do things across. Want to have one solution that fits all, and that really is not not an option in this case. Do you recommend that there should be literally separate policies for each country? So should there be social media policies written for each individual region?
It's possible that that you need to have unique policies country by country, especially if you're in a regulated business, but you can probably have a global policy that you then adjust rather than having to write each one from scratch. So there's a lot of different things that may change country by country, and some of the things are policies that are driven by regulation, but others are just driven by the business value of that country market to your business. So what you might do, which is a technique that I've used with clients for lots of different global digital marketing, is to have tiers of countries, so different levels of countries. So you might say the U.S. and a bunch of other big market countries where you do a lot of business is tier 1, and you might require that they have a listening program, and you might require that they're distributing, that have people monitoring that, they're focusing, they're responding to things in public relations that come out. So those are things that big resource countries that have lots of social media activity, you might have a different standard for them than you might have for a very small country where you might not require they have any kind of listening program at all, and you might help them put up a Facebook fan page is the only thing that they do. And so I think there's policies that are how we operate, and there's standards that say these are the things we're going to do country by country. And so the policies are mostly can be handled at a headquarters level with maybe some tweaks at a country level based on regulation. The standards that says these are the things we're going to do in each country, those are things that I think the tiered approach where different levels of support of social media in different countries makes the most sense.
Great. We've got one more question if you want to try and tackle it. It's kind of a big one. Since you talk about the size of countries being important, and China obviously being the market that it is, but seems to be pretty unique in how it handles its internet world. From the censorship and all the other things. The question is China really a good social media option? And you have an opinion on that one?
I do. I wish that I could tell you that hey, you can just ignore it. Don't pay any attention to China because it's a country that does not have free speech, and so just stay away. But the truth is that the amount of money that is in the Chinese market is so large that if you're not ignoring it for other reasons, you really shouldn't ignore it in social media either. China actually has a very high adoption rate of social media, not necessarily as a percentage of the population, but because there's so many people there, it has a high volume of social media activity. And social networks are huge, especially among people who are under the age of 30. And it's a very fractured environment. There's no one major social network there. There's actually several really important ones. QQ is the top one, but there are a number of different social networks that operate in China. And so it's very fragmented and fractured, so it makes it very difficult to operate in social media in China. But if you're doing marketing, you don't need to worry too much about the fact that there isn't free speech. You still have the ability to market your wares and you have to have local people who understand what the sensibilities are of the culture to know how to approach this. But there are companies that are operating in China as pure social media plays. And in fact, the company that I work with, Conversion, has a partnership with a company in China in order to just do social media listening and engagement in the Chinese market. And so if you find China to be an important enough country that you're operating there, you probably need to consider how you're operating in social media there.
Well, great. Looking at our time, we want to be respectful of everyone's time, as we said at the beginning. So that's really all the time that we have for today. So thanks to Mike for these great ideas, and thanks especially to our audience for your participation and your questions, which were fantastic. If any of you have questions that we did not have time to answer, you can email your question to Eileen. That's E-I-L-E-E-N at MikeMoranGroup.com, and she'll be sure to get them to Mike for the answer. Later this week, we'll send you all a link to the recording of the webinar to listen to again and to share with others, and we ask you to do that, please. And finally, we also invite you to mark your calendars for our next Biznology webinar, which will be Blogging 101. And that's scheduled for 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. on February 14th. This can be your Valentine's Day gift to somebody. So thank you very much for your time, everybody, and have a great day.